So this is a continuation of the last video I did on a basic slur exercise. Today we're going to go over a horizontal slur exercise, which just kind of elaborates on the previous one that we looked at. So watch the video for free and get all the tips and advice that I give, but if you feel like purchasing the book, just follow the link underneath the video. So in the last video we talked about how to place ascending and descending slurs, or hammer-ons and pull-offs in guitar lingo. So we went up and down the strings in a vertical way, like this, right? Also with descending slurs. So today we're going to go across the fingerboard this way, because if you practice your slurs only up and down like this, you're not really practicing the full context of how they might be used in pieces. In pieces, you're sometimes switching positions all the time, so you need to get comfortable using slurs across the strings. And it also is a good exercise in terms of left hand alignment and your ability to control your left hand alignment and keep it in control while doing slurs. So let me show you the exercise first, and then I'll just give you a few tips, but make sure you've looked at that previous video with the vertical slurs so you get the essential tips on how to play slurs. I'll be talking less about that today. So the ascending pattern, it just goes, it does a finger pattern and then moves up one fret at a time. So the finger pattern is 1, 4, 3, 4, 2, 4, and then you do the same thing up one fret. 1, 4, 3, 4, 2, 4, 1, 4, 3, 4, 2, 4. Lots of the fourth finger, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. And the descending pattern goes 4, 1. So this uses pull-offs or descending slurs, and it descends down the neck. So 4, 1, 4, 3, 4, 2. Then you shift down and do the same thing. 4, 1, 4, 3, 4, 2. Shift down 1. So when you're playing this exercise, you should go up the fingerboard and then back down, and with no break in between each pattern. So it should just be. Etc., etc., all the way back down. So this kind of idea of learning a foundational exercise in a technique, such as slurs, and then slowly transforming the exercises into different contexts will really help develop your technique naturally, because you solidify something really well in a foundational exercise, but then you kind of up the level or just change the way, the requirements of the playing, making sure that you're keeping your technique very secure. So a couple of tips for this particular exercise. One thing is make sure your fingers are staying aligned on one finger per fret. So they look essentially like this all the time. Never like this, never like this. You gotta keep this knuckle down here and keep this finger over top of this fret, like that. When you shift, you have to keep that aligned. Each finger has to be over top of each fret. You might wish to kind of just take a look at your hand position first, making sure that you maintain that. Lots of students, as they're playing through, their hand position starts to like curve and warp a little bit. So we need to make sure that we're more like that. When you're playing classical guitar, the thing you have to remember is to keep your hand in a certain position, in the perfect like textbook position, and then the arm just moves that hand position around the neck. You don't reach your fingers out and let your thumb drag behind. Every time you shift, your thumb moves with your hand. So if my thumb is behind my second finger, kind of like a textbook technique thing, it might be a little bit more this way or a little bit more this way, but generally behind the second finger. When I shift, my thumb is still behind my second finger because my arm just moves that whole hand position up. I release the tension and my arm moves everything up. Lots of students, though, when they shift to that second position, their thumb is way back here. It's like they've reached their fingers out, but they haven't actually moved that hand or allowed the arm to move the perfect hand position up the neck. So just make sure that you're keeping everything in order all the way through the whole exercise. And then, of course, observe those previous tips that I had about slurs. So keeping your fingers close to the frets, hand alignment, knuckle alignment, making sure that your slur finger comes straight down into the fret. You can practice doing it without the right hand to make sure you have that nice tap. When you're doing the descending slurs, you might want to practice doing that little pull off into the string in this hand so you get a very clear snap. Instead of just letting go of the string, which doesn't produce much clarity on the second note. So you want to practice with that clarity. In your pieces, you can decide whether you want a lot of clarity and a lot of snap on that second note, or if you want none at all, depending on what you want musically. But in your technique practice, I think you should aim for lots of clarity on every note to make sure that you can get that clarity and that you can access it if you want it. So that's number 7. It's just an extension. It takes that vertical exercise but turns it into a horizontal one to make sure you're testing your skills out in different contexts and different musical textures.